Title: Inside the 9.3 billion luxury ghost tower cracking apart in Shanghai visual hook. Narrator: in the heart of Shanghai's Lujiazui Finance District, a skyline built as a monument to sheer economic dominance, stands a 425-meter column of white structural concrete and gold-plated silence. A slender, razor-sharp square shaft rising from the corner of Century Avenue and Yincheng Road. Today, this hyper-luxury megatower is far more famous for its civil lawsuits than for its actual residents as the sun sets over the Huangpi River. Its massive panoramic windows reflect a brilliant gold across half of Pudong. But look closer after dark. On any given night, nearly 90% of its floors are pitch black. When its multi-level penthouse sold, it shattered records as the most expensive luxury condominium ever purchased in mainland China. 10 years later, that flawless white facade is visibly, violently cracking. This is the Huajing Park Tower, and what the private developers quietly altered in the official sales disclosure documents in 2013. While high-net-worth buyers were still wiring over their multi-million yuan deposits, is a secret the public was never supposed to discover. The database in this disaster is staggering. 9.3 billion, 1 billion USD in total construction costs. 22.2 billion, 3.1 billion in projected sales revenue. 1,893 distinct material and structural defects documented in a single independent engineering survey. 2 massive active lawsuits working their way through the Shanghai maritime and financial courts. More than 7 million pages of technical blueprints, emails, and concrete testing logs reviewed. 100 days of intense legal depositions from structural designers. A staggering 1.15 billion used. Comprehensive structural repair blueprint drafted in 2025 by the China Academy of Building Research. A Res. Q plan that sits completely untouched, and more than 20 severe high-pressure water leaks ripping through the mechanical floors since 2017. So why has the most expensive residential Supertall in East China sat half empty, plagued by fracturing concrete and absentee billionaire owners? While not a single yuan has been paid out to fix it, why has the Shanghai Municipal Commission of Housing and Urban Rural Development never been formally notified by the developers that anything is structurally wrong with the tower? And what exactly did the consortium delete from their own prospectus the very year the foundation was poured? This is the urgent, terrifying engineering reality inside China's empty, cracking Supertall, the original sin of the white concrete narrator. To understand how a multi-billion yuan ultra-luxury tower ends up with thousands of structural micro-fissures and almost zero permanent residents, you have to look at one man, an insatiable market ambition, and a single, fatal material choice. The year is 2006. High-rolling real estate tycoon Wang Lin purchases the historic low-rise commercial estate at the intersection of Century Avenue for a staggering 3.15 billion yens. He demolishes it immediately. But the timing is disastrous. The global financial crunch hits, and the site sits as a massive hollowed-out dirt pit for 5 long years, while Wang scrambles across state banks and private equity firms to assemble financing. Finally, he secures a joint venture partnership with the Shenzhen-based Huafeng Investment Group, injecting the cold liquidity needed to revive the dream. Wang announces to local media that this tower will not just be a building. It will be the absolute capstone of his career. He demands a design that completely rejects the traditional glass curtain walls defining Shanghai's Pudong district. He hires a world-renowned modernist architect who gives the tower a completely uniform, pure square footprint, exactly 28.5 meters on each side, creating an extreme precarious height-to-width ratio of 15:1. There would be no exterior cladding, no wind-deflecting setbacks, no structural gimmicks. The load-bearing concrete holding up the vertical weight of the entire Supertall would be the facade the world looked at. In 2011, the developers make a radical engineering directive. To achieve a pristine, porcelain-like aesthetic, they specify the exclusive use of custom white Portland cement for the exterior structural columns. It is an expensive, highly temperamental material designed for architectural finish, but one that had never been tasked with carrying immense compressive structural loads at an elevation of over 400 meters in 2012. a senior structural consultant on the project sends an urgent email directly to the joint venture directors. The warning is explicit. By forcing high-strength structural concrete to prioritize visual color over aggregate density, they are walking down a dangerous and slippery path that will eventually lead to material failure and catastrophic lawsuits to come. The warning is logged into the internal server. The warning is ignored. The order is signed. Construction begins. That was the original sin of the Huajing Park Tower. The chronology of concrete falscher narrator. To fully comprehend why those initial warnings were buried, we have to look closely at the exact timeline when the site engineers stopped writing polite memos and started pleading with the project directors to completely halt the construction cranes. According to the comprehensive civil lawsuit filed by the Huajing Park Tower Condominium Board in April 2025, the initial material mock-up tests conducted during the early design phase delivered devastating news. The data showed that under the immense structural loads generated by a 15:1 slenderness ratio, the chosen white Portland cement formula lacked the structural ductility to handle the stress. It was bound to fracture. By October 2025, an internal investigation published by the East China Architecture and Design Institute exposed a series of frantic emails between the head structural engineers and the developers. The entire engineering trade-off was summarized in 3 brutal words: color or cracks. The choice presented to management was entirely binary. Option A: sacrifice the pristine ivory appearance of the raw concrete facade by applying a standard heavy-duty gray high-performance aggregate with industrial protective coatings. Option B: press forward with the unblemished white aesthetic to preserve the marketing campaign targeted at global billionaires, and accept that the concrete would physically tear itself apart. According to the allegations detailed in the Shanghai financial court records, Wang Lin and the Huafeng Investment Group chose color. Consequently, the physical degradation of the tower did not begin years after completion. It began before the structural core had even topped out. According to construction logs compiled in the 2025 legal filings, the specialized concrete supplier was still frantically experimenting with chemical design mixes and fluidizing admixtures 3 months after the heavy hydraulic climbing formwork had already begun pouring the lower facade levels. The structural cracks emerged almost immediately as the concrete cured. Huajing Park Tower, Structural Core Timeline. 2011. White Portland Cement Directive approved. 2012. Structural consultants issue slippery path warning. 2013. Concrete pour commences. Microcracks detected instantly. 2013 mid-year. Offering plan document altered secretly. 2015. Structural topping out at 25 meters. 2017. First major interior high-pressure water leak logged. Narrator: as the cracks spider-webbed across the lower third of the building, a chief structural engineer from the East China design team, Li Jun, took a stand. He fired off an urgent, high-priority email to the development consortium with a direct, uncompromising instruction. Li wrote that the site management must immediately hold the pour and freeze all vertical climbing forms until they could formulate a valid, high-density concrete mix that could actually support the weight without fracturing. The developers, the lawsuit alleges, plowed forward with complete disregard for the engineering freeze order. Think about the sheer recklessness of this decision. In any standard regulated municipal infrastructure project, an engineering freeze is a mandatory pause and recalibrate moment. It is the point where you stop the machinery, analyze the material failure, and re-engineer the mix. But here, the private developers treated the Supertall like an assembly line commodity. They kept mixing and pouring the compromised white cement because the tower's external appearance had already been aggressively billed to a rigid, quarterly pre-sales schedule. The engineers were entirely right about the cracks, but their attempts to mitigate the disaster were also systematically shot down. To protect the porous, fracturing white concrete from East China's brutal seasonal weather, the structural team recommended the application of an opaque, elastomeric protective coating. This thick waterproof membrane would seal the facade entirely against high-velocity air and moisture infiltration. Mandranachen rejected the recommendation instantly. According to court depositions, the refusal was driven by pure aesthetics. The thick, protective, elastomeric coating would completely dull the reflective, smooth finish of the raw white concrete, destroying the tower's visual prestige and reducing its elite appeal to the ultra-wealthy buyers looking over the Pudong skyline. Instead of an industrial seal, the contractor was ordered to spray on a thin, cheap, clear silane coat. Engineers have since testified under oath that this clear coat was completely useless against Shanghai's intense summer typhoons, freezing winters, and relentless freeze-thaw cycles. And the structural engineers screaming about the concrete mix were not the only experts on the construction site whose warnings were completely erased by the pursuit of profit. The data of the overall defects narrado are, while the outside of the building was slowly fracturing under wind shear and gravity, the interior structural data was telling an even more terrifying story. When independent inspectors finally gained full access to the completed tower to conduct a comprehensive structural audit, the sheer volume of non-conforming infrastructure shocked the Municipal Housing Bureau. This wasn't a case of minor cosmetic issues, it was a systemic failure of high-rise engineering. Structural category documented engineering defects, 2016 audit, and exterior concrete 642, structural microfissures, spalling concrete zones, failed clear coat sealant, mechanical and plumbing 418, non-conforming high-pressure pipe joints, improper riser insulation, failed drainage, electrical and core, 512 deviations from as-built blueprints, unsealed conduit penetrations, moisture exposure, HV wind stabilization 321 faulty dampers, severe acoustic vibrations in trash chutes, elevator shaft pressure failures, total logged defects 1,893, active engineering failures. Every single one of these numbers represents a critical point where the physical reality of building a 425-meter tower clashed violently with the developer's cost. Udding directives. The structural concrete was too porous. The mechanical shafts were completely misaligned with the original blueprints, and the stage was set for a series of catastrophic mechanical failures deep inside the tower's core. The Peton of Chinese, Supertall Maladies narrator. The structural fracturing of the Huajing Park Tower is not an isolated incident of architectural vanity. To understand the true engineering gravity of what is happening inside this cracking column of white concrete, you have to look at the broader, highly aggressive history of Supertall construction across mainland China's Tier 1 megacity. Over the last 2 decades, the race to build the ultimate architectural monument has repeatedly pushed structural materials right to their absolute physical limits, and sometimes completely past them. Look at the structural precedents across the Yangtze River Delta in South China. When developers construct mega projects at this extreme vertical scale, they are fighting an endless, brutal war against physics, geology, and fluid dynamics. Consider the notorious Shenzhen Ping'an Finance Center structural modifications during its development phase. Originally engineered to sport a massive, soaring steel spire that would crown the building as the tallest in the country, structural engineers were forced to completely abandon the design at the absolute last minute. Why? Because advanced wind tunnel testing and structural harmonics calculations revealed that the immense aerodynamic forces and vortex shedding at that altitude would induce violent lateral swaying, threatening the structural integrity of the entire high-rise core. The spire was axed, sacrificing architectural pride to prevent structural failure. But an even more terrifying parallel to the Huajing Park Tower occurred right in the mud of the Pearl River Delta. With the sudden evacuation of the 355-meter Seg Plaza in Shenzhen, in May 2021, the entire ultra-tall office tower began to violently and inexplicably shake, triggering mass panics as thousands of workers fled into the city streets. For months, top engineers from the China Academy of Building Research scrambled to diagnose the failure. The diagnosis was chilling, a combination of extreme solar radiation causing thermal expansion on one side of the building, coupled with low-frequency wind-induced harmonics that matched the natural resonant frequency of the structural steel framework. The building was vibrating itself to pieces from the inside out. because the engineers had miscalculated how the tower's materials would adapt to everyday environmental forces. The slenderness ratio crisis. The critical metric that isolates Huajing Park Tower from its super-tall peers is its 15-to-1 slenderness ratio. While the nearby Shanghai Tower utilizes a sweeping, twisting aerodynamic shape to reduce wind loads by 24%, Huajing Park Tower stands as a rigid, unyielding square block, forcing the temperamental white concrete to absorb 100% of the shear stress. Narrator now, map those systemic structural challenges onto the fragile, waterlogged geology of Shanghai. The entire Lujiazui Finance District is built on soft, alluvial soil, essentially a deep, dense layer of soft mud and clay deposited over millennia by the Yangtze and Huangpu rivers. To anchor a 425-meter concrete shaft weighing hundreds of thousands of metric tons into this subterranean sponge, structural engineers must deploy massive, deep foundation friction piles extending nearly 100 meters into the earth, topped by a monolithic solid concrete foundation raft several stories thick. When a building has a standard, broad footprint, the massive gravity loads are distributed evenly across the subterranean soil strata. But the Huajing Park Tower has a tiny, ultra-dense footprint of just 28.5 meters square. This creates an unimaginably concentrated downward force on the alluvial clay. When you combine this intense downward pressure with the relentless, violent lateral wind loads coming off the East China Sea, you trigger a structural phenomenon known as differential settlement and dynamic soil structure interaction. Every time a typhoon rips through Shanghai, the immense wind pressure strikes the flat, unyielding square face of the Huajing Park Tower. Because the building lacks aerodynamic setbacks or a twisting geometry, the wind creates massive low-pressure vortices on the leeward side. This forces the entire 425-meter tower to sway back and forth in violent, rhythmic oscillations. As the tower sways, it acts like a giant lever, driving thousands of tons of dynamic, cyclical force down into the edges of its foundation raft. This rhythmic pounding compresses the soft alluvial soil below unevenly, inducing microshifts in the foundation. For a standard tower clad in flexible glass and aluminum curtain walls, these microshifts are manageable. The joints absorb the movement. But for the Huajing Park Tower, where the rigid structural white concrete is the facade, there is zero room for movement. Every time the building sways, and every time the soft foundation shifts even a fraction of a millimeter, those immense tensile stresses are transferred directly into the unyielding, porous white cement. The concrete cannot flex, so it does the only thing physics allows it to do. It cracks. This is the macro-engineering trap of the Huajing Park Tower. It is a rigid, aerodynamic nightmare, resting on a shifting geological sponge, constructed out of a cosmetic material that was completely unsuited for the brutal physics of the Chinese Supertall race. The infrastructure collapses inside the ghost floor's narrator. While the outside of the Huajing Park Tower was slowly fracturing under the atmospheric pressure of the Shanghai skyline, the elite buyers who had wired over fortunes, up to 650 million yen for a single high-zone property, were about to discover what happens when a multi-billion yuan tower begins to reject its own internal infrastructure. For the handful of residents who Ally attempted to move into their sky mansions, the fantasy of luxury living evaporated almost instantly. The building wasn't just settling. It was functionally failing from the inside out. The first major sign of a systemic interior crisis erupted in the weeks leading up to the Mid-Autumn Festival in 2021. Without any prior warning, the management issued an emergency notice ordering the immediate and complete evacuation of the entire 425-meter tower for 48 hours. The reason given was vague: urgent, critical remediation of the main electrical core. But the real story, leaked through internal maintenance logs and later verified in the April 2025 civil lawsuit, was terrifying. A massive, high-energy arc flash explosion had torn through one of the primary mechanical levels. An arc flash is an electrical explosion of intense heat and light, caused by a low-impedance connection. Through the air down to a ground or another voltage phase, it creates a blast wave that can liquefy copper wiring instantly and shatter concrete walls. This was not a minor blown fuse. It was the second major catastrophic electrical failure to strike the Huajing Park Tower in less than 36 months. And the physical cause of that second explosion was highly specific, according to court filings cited by Chinese financial media. A specialized maintenance contractor had been dispatched to a mechanical floor on the 40th level to address a severe, ongoing water infiltration issue. Water had been seeping steadily through the porous white concrete facade, accumulating in the structural floor slabs, armed with a heavy industrial rotary hammer drill. The worker attempted to bore a drainage channel through the concrete wall to relieve the hydrostatic pressure. But the building's internal layout was a chaotic mess. The worker drilled directly into a high-voltage, unshielded main electrical conduit that had been misrouted outside its designated utility trench during the rushed construction phase. The result was an instantaneous, blinding arc flash explosion. The sheer kinetic force of the blast threw the worker backward, several meters across the mechanical room floor, leaving them with severe burns. The explosion completely melted the primary electrical bus ducts, knocking out backup generators and crippling the building's climate control and security systems. It was a stark, undeniable confirmation of the structural crisis. For the second time in 3 years, workers trying to patch up the building's severe water leaks had accidentally triggered an explosion powerful enough to force a total high-rise evacuation. Disastrous as-built surprise narrator. Terrified by the explosions and the constant presence of water inside the walls, the Huajing Park Tower Condominium Board took matters into their own hands. They bypassed the developer's hand-picked property management firm and independently commissioned a comprehensive forensic engineering audit of the entire tower's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. When the independent engineering firm delivered its final report, the data left the condo board absolutely horrified. The forensic audit revealed that an incredible 73% of the building's total mechanical, plumbing, and electrical infrastructure did not conform to the developer's official, certified as-built engineering drawings. Let that percentage sink in. Nearly 3/4 of the life support systems inside this luxury Supertall had been altered, rerouted, or cheapened on the fly during construction to maintain the blistering speed of the vertical pour. Even worse, the engineers classified almost 1/4 of those non-conforming utility components as active life safety hazards. High-pressure gas lines were routed directly adjacent to uninsulated electrical junctions. Emergency smoke extraction dampers were jammed shut by misaligned structural concrete overpours. Drainage systems were pitched backward, forcing graywater to pool inside the floor plates. Huajing Park Tower audit. Mechanical discrepancy. Official as-built blueprints. 100% code-compliant layout. Forensic engineering audit. 73% non-conforming infrastructure. Life safety classification. 24% categorized as direct active hazards. Narrator. According to the updated April 2025 court filings, the building has logged more than 20 severe, high-volume water leaks since 2017 alone. These aren't minor pipe drips. These are high-pressure pipe ruptures that cascade down through the multi-million yuan apartments below, destroying priceless custom woodwork, imported Italian marble, and high-end electronics. But the list of structural nightmares compiled by the wealthy owners reads less like a luxury brochure and more like a psychological horror script. The bomb drop trash chute because the tower rises 425 meters in a straight, unyielding vertical line without any structural breaks or deceleration bends. The central trash chute is a straight drop. When wealthy residents on the upper floors drop heavy garbage bags down the chute, the bags accelerate to terminal velocity. By the time they hit the collection hoppers at the bottom, the kinetic impact creates a concussive acoustic shockwave that sounds like a bomb detonating, sending structural vibrations through the lower zone luxury units. The sleep-depriving vibrations, to prevent the slender 15-to-1 tower from snapping in high winds, the engineers installed massive heavy mechanical equipment on the upper utility floors. But because the equipment was improperly decoupled from the structural concrete frame, the constant operation of the high-velocity pumps and ventilation fans transmits a low-frequency, hum-like structural vibration directly through the concrete. At certain heights, this constant hum causes furniture to micro-vibrate and creates an unceasing acoustic resonance that residents report makes sleeping physically impossible. The high-wind elevator trap. The elevator shafts inside the Huajing Park Tower are subjected to immense piston effect air pressures as the high-speed cabs move up and down. When strong seasonal gales strike the flat exterior concrete facade, the building's natural sway misaligns the ultra-long elevator cables within the narrow structural shafts. During one severe wind event, an elite resident was trapped inside a stalled elevator cab for over an hour, suspended hundreds of meters in the air while the cab banged violently against its guide rails as the tower swayed. The click-clack structural chorus. As temperature variations shift between the blazing hot Shanghai summers and freezing winter nights, the massive structural concrete core expands and contracts. Because the white concrete is laced with microfractures, the shifting thermal stresses cause the building to emit a continuous, haunting chorus of loud pops, deep metallic creaks, and sharp clicking sounds that echo through the empty, dark corridors. The absentee billionaires and unlit window narrator. And while the tower was physically torturing the handful of people inside it, the broader real estate market was realizing that the Huajing Park Tower was serving a completely different purpose. It wasn't built to be a neighborhood. It was built to be a vertical, safe deposit box for international capital. By April 2024, local real estate registries reported that the tower was effectively 100% sold out, with only a single, compromised unit remaining in the developer's inventory. But in the luxury market of Shanghai, sold has absolutely nothing to do with occupied. According to an exhaustive unit-by-unit transaction analysis published in August 2025, the financial stigma surrounding the tower's engineering defects had completely broken its investment logic. 10 out of 16 high-profile owners who attempted to liquidate and resell their units between 2021 and 2025 were forced to take staggering financial losses. The very units that had set records as the premier residential addresses in mainland China had become the most heavily discounted luxury real estate on a price per square meter basis in the entire East China market. The Supertall had officially entered the public imagination as a hollow monument to speculative excess. Data published in February 2026 by regional urban planning journals confirmed that across the 7 tallest luxury residential towers in Shanghai, nearly half of the privately owned units sit completely unoccupied 365 days a year. The properties are held through complex webs of limited liability companies, offshore trusts, and shell corporations. The owners are completely absentee tycoons who have never spent a single night inside the city. The lights are permanently off. The pattern is perfectly documented at the individual unit level. A high-profile Chinese celebrity couple purchased a sprawling 3-bedroom zone in the tower in 2018 for a recorded 110 million yens. After experiencing the persistent water leaks and elevator stalls firsthand, they dumped the property less than 12 months later at a steep discount just to get off the deed. A prominent coal magnate from Shanxi province listed his duplex penthouse in June 2021 for an optimistic 1.22 billion yen. By May 2024, after the structural concrete defects became public knowledge, he was forced to slash his asking price down to 756 million yens, a crushing 464 million valuation drop on a single piece of real estate. Another mid-zone unit traded for a heavily depressed 500 million yens in 2022, right after the engineering disclosures were filed in open court. The Huajing Park Tower is not empty because nobody bought it. It is empty in the only way that matters to the physical life of a city. The ultra-wealthy owners have collected their tax shelters, parked their liquid cash safely away from regulatory oversight, and locked the doors. The lights do not come on. The kitchens have never seen a hot meal. The apartments have no people in them. And the elite buyers who poured hundreds of millions of yuan into these concrete ski boxes still had no idea that the official sales contract they had signed had been quietly, legally re-engineered behind their backs before the foundation was even dry. The 115 billiomath trap narrator. So, why hasn't anyone stepped in to fix the spreading fractures on China's most expensive residential tower? The engineering solution itself isn't a mystery. The blueprints to save the structure already exist. According to a highly confidential 2025 engineering review spearheaded by the China Academy of Building Research, lead structural engineer Steve Bogiornio, acting as an independent international consultant, delivered a definitive rescue protocol. The cost? A staggering $1.15 billion, $160 million USD. The timeline? 3 years of continuous, highly disruptive structural renovation. The remediation plan requires engineers to systematically inject high-grade epoxy resins deep into the fracturing core, strip away the useless clear silane coat, wrap the exterior structural concrete columns in high-tensile carbon fiber composites, and completely overhaul the non-conforming mechanical risers to isolate them from water damage. The warning issued by the engineering team to the developers was dire. If this $1.15 billion repair plan is not initiated immediately, chunks of the specialized white concrete will begin to spall off the facade and plunge hundreds of meters to the streets below. The panoramic windows will gradually break loose from their warped frames under wind shear. The internal mechanical cores will experience systemic failure, and the high-pressure plumbing joints will snap under the unmitigated structural vibrations. Ultimately, water seeping unabated into those deep micro-fissures will reach the internal structural steel rebar, triggering mass corrosion that could permanently compromise the structural integrity of the entire $9.3 billion investment. So, why has the repair work not started? Let us look at the brutal economic math. Huajing Park Tower, the rescue math collapse. Original construction cost, $930 billion. Required engineering rescue, plus $1.15 billion. Total capital invested, $10.45 billion. Current luxury market value, heavily depreciated via structural stigma. Narrator, the tower cost $9.3 billion to construct. Adding the required engineering rescue package pushes the all-in development cost past 10.45 billion yens. Meanwhile, the market value of the individual units has been in freefall ever since the structural court filings were made public. In the hyper-competitive luxury real estate market of East China, a premium brand name is everything. The moment a building's name becomes synonymous with catastrophic engineering defects, exploding conduits, and structural cracking, it carries a permanent, irreversible market stigma. Even if you spend the 1.15 billion yen to seal every crack and stabilize the shaking elevators, the world's billionaires will not pay premium prices to live in a repaired disaster. The sheer cost of the rescue structurally exceeds the ultimate rescued value of the asset. The original 2021 civil lawsuit, filed by the wealthy owners, sought a massive 1.8 billion yens in damages. The subsequent 2025 fraud lawsuit seeks an additional 1.18 billion plus heavy punitive fines. The developers are fighting back with an army of corporate attorneys, flatly denying every single structural allegation. In aggressive public statements, the Huafeng investment group, called the 2025 engineering fraud, claims entirely baseless, categorically untrue, and legally defamatory. Therefore, the tower sits in a state of total structural and legal paralysis. It remains half empty, slowly fracturing in the Pudong wind, wrapped in a cheap clear coat that structural experts explicitly warned would fail against the seasonal elements. The condominium board's legal teams clash with the developer's lawyers across a mountain of 7 million pages of evidence and 100 days of bitter depositions. While the market continues to price the units at a deep discount, the cracks continue to spread across the white cement. But the financial and material math is not the most alarming part of this engineering disaster. The single worst part of this entire story is what is missing from the Shanghai municipal government's regulatory archives, the monument to a single-word narrator. What was the true, underlying engineering failure behind the Huajing Park Tower? It wasn't just an experimental white Portland cement mix, and it wasn't just a series of misrouted electrical wires. It was a flawed corporate philosophy. It was the arrogant belief that a private developer could rewrite legal sales documents fast enough to outrun the physical laws of a 425-meter concrete Supertall. The Condominium Board's April 2025 lawsuit alleges, and municipal records confirm, that the building's official offering and disclosure plan filed with the local housing bureau was quietly and calculatedly revised in 2013, right while pre-sales were peaking. The original, legally binding engineering text read, "The high density of the structural concrete will prevent all water penetration." The revised wording slipped into the final buyer contracts. Read, "The structural concrete and properly sealed windows have been designed to prevent water penetration." The developers changed a single, definitive word. They erased the absolute guarantee of will and replaced it with the speculative hope of "designed to." This subtle, legalistic edit corresponded exactly with what the developers already knew from their internal mock-up tests. The white concrete was going to fracture under stress. They re-engineered the contract because they knew they couldn't re-engineer the physics of the tower. The contractual sleight of hand. Original compliance text. "The concrete will prevent water penetration." Revis developer text. "The concrete is designed to prevent water penetration." Narrator. Under the strict construction codes enforced by the Shanghai Municipal Commission of Housing and Urban Rural Development, the licensed architects and supervising engineers responsible for a Supertall project are legally required to immediately notify the Department of Buildings and local safety bureaus of any hazardous structural conditions. Yet, when questioned by investigative journalists, a spokesperson for the Municipal Construction Commission confirmed that the city has never been formally notified of any hazardous material conditions or structural failures at the Huajing Park Tower, because the developers have classified the cracks as minor cosmetic settling and handled the electrical explosions through private, unlogged maintenance contractors. The building avoids an official municipal occupancy ban. Today, the Huajing Park Tower stands tall over the Pudong skyline as a permanent 425-meter monument to a single word. A soaring concrete reminder of the vast, terrifying difference between an engineering guarantee and a corporate hope in the hyper-accelerated race to dominate the skies along China's most expensive financial rows. The most dangerous structural shortcuts are never the ones poured directly into the concrete. They are the ones edited into the sales contract.